In today's tutorial, I'll be showing you how to draft, cut and sew a 6 pieces blouse for people with bigger boobs. Those that have bigger boobs, how to make a 6 pieces blouse for them so that it fits properly. If you'd like to see how I made this, please watch the end of this video. Hello and welcome back to the channel. This is Everything April. Thank you to all subscribers and returning viewers. We've gotten to 4,000 subscribers. Thank you for your support. And if this is your first time seeing my video, you're welcome. Please subscribe if you're yet to subscribe to this channel and give this video a thumbs up. So the first thing I'll do will be to draft out the Princess That Bustier pattern first using the measurements displayed on the screen. Okay, so for this, the zip is going to be in front. So I've added my zipper allowance on the front pattern, and my zipper allowance I'm using here is 1.5 inches. Okay, so for the paper I have quarter. You need quarter of the biggest body circumference plus extra 4 to 5 inches. So that's what I have. Okay, so I'm using the measurement that were displayed to make this. I already have on this channel a detailed tutorial on how to draft a Princess That Bustier pattern for people with bigger boob, with bust circumference of 50 and above. Okay, so you can watch that video. The link is showing up on the screen, and I'll also drop the link in the description box. You can watch that video so that you understand how you can take the darts and so that everything fits properly. So if you're someone with smaller bust size or just medium bust size, I also have a tutorial on how to draft a Princess That Bustier pattern. Okay, that one is not for people with big boobs. So I'll also drop the link to that video in the description box. So here the bust span I'm using is 9 inches divided by 2 is 4.5 inches. So that is the line I just ruled out. I added extra half into it, making it 5 inches. So now I'm going to talk about the darts, how I took the darts. On the under bust, I took a total of 3.5 inches darts. In inward, I took 1 inch, and outer this way, I took 2.5 inches. On the waist, I took ½ inch and 2 inches, making it total of 2.5 inches removed from the waistline. So the dart I will be removing on the waistline is what I will bring down to the hip line. So the hip line is the length of this blouse. Okay, so I'm just bringing down that measurement so you can see what I'm doing. I'm joining them with a straight line. Then I'm going to connect the darts on the waist to the dart on the under bust. From the bust point line, I'm going to come down by 1.75 inches. Okay, and then connect to the dart on the under bust. This is to create room to accommodate the bust. Okay, so now to make the armhole curve, you know how we measure this vertical line, and then at half of that line I came in by 3/4 of an inch and made my armhole curve. So for the armhole princess line, I'm going to measure this armhole curve, find the midpoint, and from the midpoint come down by ½ an inch because I'm adding all the allowances. Okay, so then from the bust point I would go up by 1 inch and then connect that point. Okay, the measurements I found on the armhole, I would connect it to this 1 inch I came up by. Okay, then I'm going to tighten the armhole line. I'm going to tighten the line there by taking 1/4 of an inch on both sides. That's I'm removing ½ inch for armhole tightening, and then I would replace that. I would go up by 1 inch and connect it to the lower dart leg. So you can see what I did, and then I'm reconnecting the armhole curve like shown. So I'm going to use a French curve to connect the dart coming from the armhole to the dart coming from the under bust. Okay, I've made it into a curve, so everything is now well curved out. Then on the chest line, I'm going to impute I've already imputed 1/4 of the bust measurement plus extra 1 inch for joining the center front and side front together. On the waist, I impute 1/4 of the waist measurement plus the 2.5 inches that will be removed from the waist. Then I would add another 1 inch for joining the center front and side front together. On the hip, I impute 1/4 of the hip measurement plus the 2.5 inches cut out as that, and extra 1 inch for joining the center front and side front together. Then I would connect all my measurements. So that's what I'm doing here. After connecting that, I'll add my side seam allowance. I would use 1.5 inches side seam allowance. So use whatever allowance you would like to use. For the underarm dart or side dart, I'm going to use 2.5 inches, which is the difference in height between the front half length and the back half length. So all these shaded parts will be cut out. They are darts, so I would cut that out. For the neckline, I'm using a neck width of 4 inches and a neck depth of 4 inches for my neckline. Okay, so before I cut out the dart, I'll make sure I don't have sharp points on the dart. I'll smoothen out the sharp points on the dart before I cut out. And then for the side darts, I would have to close that up. So to close it up, I'm going to first cut through the center darts, waist darts this way. Okay, to enable me close that one. You wouldn't want the side panel to be in 2 pieces, so that's why I'm cutting this open. So see how I cut mine. So follow the suit. When I close up this dart, you see that my side seams have shifted. The side lines on the side pattern has shifted, so I'm going to replace that. So I'll connect the shifted line back to the chest line, okay, so that I don't have shortage after cutting out. Okay, so when I do this, I'm going to use a tape to close up this part, the same part, okay, after cutting. So just remember that all allowances have been added on this pattern. So on the shoulder line, I'm going to add 1/2 inch as well for joining the front and the back together. For the back, I've drafted out my normal basic bodice pattern at the back. Okay, so the back is 2.5 inches shorter than the front part. Okay, so the neckline, I used 4 inches neck width and 1.5 inches neck depth. And for the shoulder slope at the back, I came down by 1/2 inch. Okay, that's how I make my patterns if you've been following my videos. So for this pattern, I measured out the line you see here is where all my measurements started from, and before that line I have 1/2 inch joining allowance. I'll be explaining that later, why I have that measurement out. Okay, so for the for my darts, I used the bust span measurements, half of the bust span measurement plus extra 1/2 inch like I did in front, 5 inches. And after that line, I took 1/2 inch dart on both sides, which I replaced on the waist, and also added extra 1 inch for joining the center back and side back together. Okay, so for the armhole princess line, I measured the armhole curve and found the midpoint, and from the midpoint I came downward again by 1/2 inch, extra 1/2 inch, and I noted that. Then I'm going to connect that point I just noted on the armhole to the dart where my dart stopped. My dart stopped 1 inch below the chest line, so that's why I'm connecting this. You see how I connected it, and I'm smoothing it out so it's not sharp at this point. Then from this dart leg, I went outward again by 1/2 inch and connected to avoid shortage when I'm joining the center back and side back together. And then I'm going to withdraw my armhole. So this is now a new armhole line. Okay, so coming to this line, this 1/2 inch I was talking about, this part is not compulsory. Okay, that's if you want to split the back. So the back, normally you don't need to split it, but because I don't want any puffiness at the back, so from the edge of my paper I came in on the waistline by 3/4 inch, and I'll be connecting that to the chest line as you can see me what I'm doing. Okay, so I came in by 3/4 inch, and that 1/2 inch I have before my main measurement is a joining allowance when I split the back. Okay, so this is to eliminate any kind of puffiness at the back, especially since this is for a big busted person. And when I do this, I'm going to replace that 3/4 inch after all my measurements on the waistline again, and I'll connect it to the chest line as I'm demonstrating, and downward like I did when I was eliminating the 3/4 inch I removed. Okay, so this is optional. You may or may not decide to divide your back part, but I decided to do this. Okay, so when you remove this 3/4 inch, remember to replace it so that you don't have shortage. Okay, please take note that I added extra 1 inch on the chest line, the waistline and hip line for joining the side back and center back together, just like I did for the front side. So after closing the bust, the side dart in front, okay, you notice that the side front and the side back match each other by the side. Now for the 6 pieces part, I will take my center front pattern and I'm going to attach extra paper to it, and I've sellotaped them together. Make sure that they are equal at the lower part. Okay, so the paper should get to the waistline. Okay, so on this paper I'm going to take an extra 4.5 inches at the hem part, like I'm demonstrating. So you can take as little as 2.5 or 3 inches depending on how you want it to come out, but I took 4.5 inches and connected it to the waistline. So I'll go ahead and cut this out. Okay, so I'm adding 4.5 inches. That's what I added. Then I'll also get the center piece of the front, and you see how I extended the papers on both sides. So on both sides I'm going to take that 4.5 inches again on either side of the center piece, the center front and side front. Okay, so that's what I'm doing like this, and I'll go ahead and cut out the excesses, the sides that are not needed. So this is it for the front and the back, but I don't want it pointed out this way. So from the hem part on this side I'm going to come up by 1.5 inch and divide what I have on the hem into 2 equal parts and then make a curve. Okay, so I want the point where they are joined to be curved. I don't want it sharp and pointed like it was after having an extension for the pieces. Okay, so I'm just trimming this out. I would also do that for the side piece, the side front. I would go up on both sides by 1.5 inches. I would measure the total length I have on the hem and then divide that into 2. I'll find the midpoint. That's just what I'm doing here. I'll find the midpoint and then I'll connect that 1.5 inches to the midpoint from the right, and I'll do the same thing from the left side. Then I'll go ahead and cut out this point so that everything will be round and curved and not sharp at the edge. So that's what I'm doing. So all this, that's what I'm going to do at the back piece. So this is it for the front piece. For the back piece, I've also added an extended paper on the center back, and I will take that 4.5 inches and connect to the waist line like I did for the front center piece. I'm doing the same for the center back. I would still come up by 1.5 inches and make a curve towards the midpoint of the hem part of this center piece. So I would also do the same thing for the side back. Okay, so the side back, what I did to the side front is what I'll do to the side back pattern as well. So this is my side back. I'm taking 4.5 inches on both sides, and then I'll connect them to the waistline. Okay, so it's just the same thing. Whatever you added in the front part, that's what you add to the back part. Okay, so if you're using 4 inches, you use 4 inches for all pieces. If you're using 3, you use for all pieces. And then I'm going upward by the 1.5 inches, and I'll find the midpoint and then make a curve. So I'll then, after cutting this out, I would use this to cut out my main fabric and their linings. Okay, and I'll be ironing hairstay to all the pieces. I'll be cutting out the lining and the main fabric. So I will be adding a cape to the front part of this blouse. So I'm just pinning a paper underneath the center front, and I'm going to just trim out the neckline and the shoulder so that the paper takes the same shape as the neckline and the shoulder. And then I'm going to take the shape for the cape. So for this fabric, the cape will not be getting into the zipper allowance. Remember, the zip is in front, so I'll remove 1.5 inches from this paper. Okay, so the upper part of the center front is the same shape with this paper. so that's why I removed the zipper allowance. Then I'm going to measure how big or bold I want the cape to be. So I want it to be 2.5 inches after sewing, so I'm going to take 3.5 inches. That's what I'm going to measure all around on this paper, because that 1 inch is for join and sewing allowance, turning allowance for the lower part, and join allowance to the neckline. Okay, so I would connect these dotted lines, then at the lower part this way, and I will trim out this excess first. So at the lower part, I'm going to come inward by 3/4 of an inch and then connect it towards the neck part. This is on the paper now that I have. So after connecting this, I'll take 1/2 inch on this side for turning allowance, okay, to turn this side when I cut it out. And I'll use this pattern now to cut 4 pieces, 2 pieces on each side of the neck. Okay, so that's what I would do. Then for this, I'm going to pad this. Okay, though I have a detailed video on how you can pad a princess that bustier, but I'll be showing you how I cut out the wording for this. Okay, so I used the bust radius, which is 4.5 inches. From the bust point on the center front, I went up by 4.5 inches. Okay, so that is what the line I just drew. So that's where the wording will stop. Okay, so I've also made that note of that point on the side front, and on the bust line on the side front, I measured to the side 5 inches, and I just made a curve for the bust radius. So for a detailed video on how you can pad your bustier, I'll be dropping the link in the description box. So I'll go ahead and cut out my wording. So for this blouse, I used the softest wording. Okay, I used a soft wording for this. I don't want to use a hard one. And for the center wording, you make sure it doesn't get into the zipper allowance. So you can see how I trimmed it off, so it just stops like 1/4 or 1/2 inch before the zipper allowance. Okay, so that's what you do, and then you use it to iron it. This is fusible, so I would iron it on my main fabric. Okay, so I'll go ahead and cut out my main fabric and show you what's next to do. So I've cut out my my fabrics. Okay, the linings are 1/2 inch shorter than the main fabric. Okay, so these are the back pieces. I'll just join them using 1/2 inch seam allowance on all the sides. Okay, I'll join all 4 together, and for the front part, I'll join the center front and side front together and their linings as well. Okay, and this for the cape, I cut 4 pieces like I said, 2 for each side, and I'll just turn the center side of the cape and the lower part. Okay, and notch properly and turn to the right side. So this is the back piece. It's now just one back piece and the lining. Okay, I notched the curved parts and ironed properly. So what I'm going to do now is to hold them right sides facing each other and turn the neckline, the hem part, and the sides. For the front, I've done the same. I notched the curves and ironed out properly. So what I'm going to do now is to turn out, but before I do that, I want to have an in-seam finishing. I want to have a neat finishing. So the first thing will be to attach the zip on the main fabric. Okay, see how I'm placing my zip, right side of the zip to the right side of the main fabric. So after attaching the zip, I would use the lining to turn the neckline and the hem part. Then I will now attach the zip on the lining and then also turn the other side and then bring it out. When I do that for one side, I'll also do it for the other side. That way you have a neat and clean finishing. So I've turned out the back and the front and I've ironed properly. So what I'll do now will be to join them by the shoulder, the front and the back by the shoulder, using the 1/2 inch seam allowance I left for it. Okay, so I've also attached the cape. I attached the cape before turning the neckline. So after joining by the shoulder, I would shape and attach a sleeve of my choice. So for this, I used I attached a balloon sleeve, and I have a video on how you can make a balloon sleeve using slash and spread method. So we've come to the end of this tutorial. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel if you've not subscribed, and also turn on the notification bell so that you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. Until the next one, bye.